I've had a student ask me like how to draw, and especially with pencils and stuff like that. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about first is the kind of paper that you have. It's really hard to show with a camera, but honestly, every paper is a little bit different. There's hot press and cold press paper, and it ultimately has more of a textural feel, more grain to it, and it will hold pencils differently. It'll hold the lead from a charcoal pencil differently, or a lead pencil completely differently. I've got a couple different things here. The first thing I've got is just a set of traditional pencils here. They are nothing more than like the Staedtler or Konopor or whatever you choose, but they're just drawing pencils, and they go in a range from 5B to looks like 4H. Actually, it looks like 8B to H. And so the difference between these is if I start picking a let's see here, if I start picking a harder one, so I'm going to go with a 2H here, and a 2H, if I scritch on the paper here like so, you can see that it doesn't leave a whole lot of marks. It still pushes tight together, and all I'm doing is basically going over and over and building up the dark values. Pretty simple, pretty easy to understand. Now, if I go with something softer, let's do an exaggerated 8B here. And so the 8B, if I do the same thing right next to it, you can see that automatically it doesn't take nearly as much to put a much darker mark on there. And that is the majority of what pencils kind of feel like. Now, you can kind of see it, but if I use more of the side of the pencil here, there's more grain to it, if you will. It doesn't adhere as well, so you're going to get a much more kind of textural feel to your pencil leads. Okay, and with that idea in mind, there's different things out there. There's different types of pencils, everything from the mechanical pencil, which I used to use quite a bit, and it gives you a nice thin line, and it's basically about building up the lines as you work with it. You can't use the side of this. Okay, I also have, and they come in different varieties and sizes and all this stuff. They also have sketch pencils or carbon sketch pencils, which are more closer to charcoal, and they go significantly darker and significantly, as you can see, it's a lot harder to get a light value from it. And at that point, when you're trying to get a light value from this, ultimately there's a couple ways you can do this. You can either do it with your finger to smudge it over, so I can just kind of move it back and forth. But the big thing about the finger is you have to watch your oils. There's a lot of times that you'll be working and you can leave a fingerprint, and because it's oil, it's really hard to like rub away, and you can see I can't really rub that, so you have to be very careful with your fingers. I generally tend to constantly rub my fingers on a piece of cloth. That's why a lot of artists are charcoal covered here. But the other thing is you can get a stick like this, and you can make your own with some paper or whatever, but ultimately what this does is just pushes the blend in there for you. Basically allows you to kind of blend that outward as you work on it, so you can get a much kind of cleaner line work like that. So there's the blending nubs. Now again, there's different types of pencils. Like you can grab these sticks here. So this is a ArtStation graphite lead. This is just a graphite block here, if you will. They also have like this is a graphite block, and ultimately you shave it with a knife, and then you can get your side pencils like this, and it's pretty close to being the same thing as the side of a pencil. The only thing is you can actually like grab more surface area with that as well. Same thing with this one. You can see that this is basically like so. Now if you are drawing with a pencil, depending on your surface underneath it also makes sense with how it's going to apply. So for an example, if right now I've just got a slight sheet of gray paper under there, and I've got another piece underneath, so I will get a softer, more defined feel as I draw. Now if I take the lid of the pen here, or pencil case here, and then draw on top of it and push, I'll still get similar aspects, but you'll notice there's more breathing room. So the softer you have, so if you're working on a sketchbook, that will ultimately give you much more kind of aspects of like value changes and stuff like that. And then on top of that, there's also other things like layout pencils, which are a little bit harder. And there's even ebony pencils here. An ebony pencil, this is my used up one, but an ebony pencil is really dark, really fast. But because it's a little bit harder, I can actually control it a little bit more. So it really depends on what you're doing as far as that goes. Now you'll see the cat hair floating all over the place. So with that in mind, ultimately what we're going to do is we are going to show you how to build up and start a kind of whole kind of picture here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose an H lead pencil. So this one is a 2H, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do small to keep time down. So I'm just going to block out my shapes, and that's the first thing I do. And this is kind of the gestural sketch stage. I've got, you know, like a picture of a pin up here that I've been kind of working on lately. So I'm just going to kind of block out the kind of overall shapes and forms, and you can kind of tell here that I'm just kind of roughing out the sketch. Now, because I'm using a lighter weight pencil, it's not really pushing as much. Like, I don't have a very harsh line, and so you can see that it is definitely, you can see that it's definitely a issue here, and like so. Now I can also like just block this out. I'm just blocking out ultimate shapes here, and like so. And I've got my knees here, and so ultimately I'm just blocking out this idea of this portrait here. So with that in mind, my big thing is to get the idea down, get it flattened out, kind of rough out where everything's going, and so that is my kind of process. Now, if it's not perfect, it's fine, because with a lighter weight pencil, I can always kind of move back and forth and kind of adjust things with sketching. I'm not worried about erasing at this point. I'm just going to ultimately create that aspect. Now, so with this in mind, I'm just basically blocking out my individual shapes. So I'm roughing out, and you can see my cat here come in the way because she really wants to sit next to me. She's obsessing over the fact that I'm doing something without her. So, and then I'm just kind of blocking out like my process here. And I'm just sketching out shapes. Now, when I do this, I generally kind of block out how things look from that standpoint. So, you know, I kind of start measuring angles. So like here, I come down and look, measuring with my pencil here, and kind of saying, okay, this is coming down this way. You know, like I'm coming down here, so it looks like I need to bring this out a little bit. If I bring this out and bring that out a little bit more. And so ultimately it's just a matter of kind of creating the defined idea of like how the shapes and form fit in. So, you know, measuring angles, measuring distances. I'm not worried about super details, but I'm worried about basically getting in here and trying to block out the individual shapes. Now, once I get this rough down here, like so, once I get this rough and everything kind of looks like I need it to as far as like general proportions. I'm not worried about anything more than general proportions. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with a little bit harder lead. So this is a 2B here, and the 2B is exact opposite of the spectrum. And I'm going to start drawing in the, making sure things look a little bit, properly done. So here I'm going to start. So I'm blocking out my line work here, and I am just starting to sketch the lines that I do see. There's a part in the hair. I'm just going to kind of bring it down like this. Bring that down here. And then this is where, like, once I start getting in there, this is where I am starting to get a feel for the minute lines that I'm trying to draw. So that is, the little details that I'm trying to build up here. And a lot of people have difficulties with the hands, but the hands are nothing more than really simple tubes. And I'm just gonna block out the tubes first. So this is the first knuckle to the second knuckle. And I'm just kind of making sure that I'm paying attention to where the little pieces are knocking out. And so this is my first tube here, like so. And then my second tube comes down a little bit more, and then my first tube, my first joint here comes down. So I'm just kind of blocking out this a little bit more. And you can watch my hand video here on how to kind of block that out, but ultimately so there's that. And then what I'm going to do is I've got the other hand coming in here, and I'm just going to kind of block out the same thing. Now I'm just really sketching this out, even though it's pretty lightweight. I'm just trying to pay attention to what's going on here. And so I'm just kind of bringing that down a little bit more, and then I can always go in there later with a more finite, pencil and kind of build that out. And so ultimately, here's my hand, my knee, and it comes up, and then this comes down here like so. Make sure that this line comes all the way through, so that it doesn't, you follow through on the line. So even though I'm drawing over this, by following through, I know that that's where that knee is going to end up at. And then I'm just trying to draw like this. And then this comes down a little bit, and this is the overlap, that T that I was talking about last week, or the other week. And then this is my heel, comes down, and then I've got kind of a heavier weight shadow here And so like so. So this is my overall outline. Okay, now with that outline in place, then I'm going to start adding in base shadows. Now I'm going to just use a block because this is, I just think it's going to be faster for time, but ultimately all I'm going to do is start by adding in the darker shadows. So I'm going to kind of block in, actually let's go with this here. So I'm going to just block in the super darks and get the cat hair out of the way here. So this, you can tell, is a little bit darker than my pencil, and that's okay. I'm just ultimately kind of blocking in my core shadows. And so I'm adding in where I think, so I've got and this is Mozzie. Mozzie wants a chair over here, so let me stop this for a second. All right, back again. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab this here and I'm just going to ultimately start with just my base shapes. I'm trying not to get too dark at this point. And I'm gonna just add in my core shadows here. And then I'm going to add in my core shadows underneath the figure here. And even though I'm not going super dark at this point in time, I'm more concerned about ultimately where things are lining up. So I'm looking at those big block shadows, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And we can always build in later. Now, I'm gonna go in and go with a real light tone here. Like so. Like this. And start just by trying to build out some of those light tones. Now I'm not going to go and cover everything up here because what I do not want to do is I don't want to get super dark super fast, because what's going to happen is I'm going to start blending some of these, and I can always go darker with core shadows and elements like that. So I've got my rough idea here of where the shadows are going and kind of how the overall figure goes. Now I'm going to just rub my finger on the ground here like this, and that's going to wipe some of the oils off, and so then I can just simply kind of go through and I'm going to blend some of this together. And that's going to just smooth things out and give me kind of an overall softer feeling as I work. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, I think I'm going to use my ebony pencil here. And I'm going to start pulling in some of these super blacks. And yes, I'm reinforcing some of these lines, but ultimately these lines are going to help me kind of reinforce the overall kind of feeling of this character. So I'm going to just darken here and all right. So with that, I'm going to go back in and I'm going to really darken her hair. And as far as erasers go, just basically there's a ton of erasers out there, and I think this is a bad one. But you can look on it. If it leaves marks behind, like it's leaving a blue behind, I would never use that one for a particular like eraser. You can always get these just erasers by themselves, and they're softer, and they're more likely to pull some of that away. So we can always subtract too, depending on what we're trying to achieve here. Just be aware that sometimes, like, no matter how much you erase, you're going to leave a little bit of mark. And so if you press too hard, you're going to get a darker feel to it, if that makes sense. Like you'll never get rid of it per se. And what we're going to do is just kind of start darkening some of this. And you can definitely see how dark I'm going right now. And that's okay that I'm going super dark, because I know that this is going to be near black. But I'm going to not try. The goal is to not like reinforce, like don't try and cover the whole paper in like a mid-tone gray. I know some artists do that, and that's fine. That's their style. But as a new artist, I generally find that when you cover it in gray, it's hard to go back into the white. So just do it in small chunks. You can definitely see here that I'm kind of like blocking out and you'll notice that if you press hard in one section and then don't press as hard on the other section, you'll definitely see that there's some issues going on. So I'm going super dark here for the hair, especially because I'm trying to get that in place here. And then so let's go like this. And then back here, I'm going to, so I see the belly button back there, and I'm looking at those subtle tones of grays and trying to block some of those out. Now, it's not going to be all black here by any means, but I'm going to try and get this a little bit darker, but still pay attention to what you're doing. Now, with a big area of black like this, don't go in all different directions like you're scribbling. Just kind of go in one direction and build it up. Like so. And then you'll have areas where there's two parts coming together, but you also have a core shadow and a reflected light. So especially in her breasts here, you'll notice that this is not dark near the bottom, and so ultimately it's going to create a little bit more of a not a super dark area. It's still in shadow, but because of the way the shadow goes, like so, there you go. So because of the way the shadow goes, it ultimately needs to reinforce it. Now you'll notice as I start working with smaller pencils here, they do have holders for these pencils, and the holders will allow you to relax a little bit more and not necessarily break apart your break your hand doing this. So you'll notice that I'm just building up like just shapes that I see and just rough forms, okay? And even just putting in just lighter sketches here like so, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing around here. And I'm always trying to relate the different darks. So this is my darkest dark up here. I need to kind of manipulate that dark and make it less than anything else. So I'm going to have the same dark here, and I'm just going to kind of build that up. Now, as I do this, you'll see that ultimately like so. And then I do have a little bit of a dark down here. Just trying to block that out. And you'll notice that I start taking some of this and kind of blending it together just to smooth out the form a little bit more. You'll notice that that oil that I was talking about basically popped out right here. And sometimes you can remove it, and sometimes you get stuck with this just dark spot. And I'm really trying to reinforce the lights, so that's why I'm going through and erasing some of these forms here, just pulling out some of the highlights in our arms. And as I continue to work, it's ultimately one step at a time. And at this point, I'm just going to speed up the video a little bit here so that you can get a sense of this. Now, you can also notice here, I'm not working on shading the fingers, but necessarily putting the shadows underneath to make the fingers pop out. Going through and adding in, darker shades to add a little bit more form into the knees and the other body parts here. And ultimately, I'm just going through and kind of defining each little bit a little bit more, and a little bit more. All right, and you'll notice I just keep going back and forth to different sections. Right now I'm working on the face, the hairline, and building up those darks and lights. I'm slowly building up the underside of the chin and then building over the shadows in the face. I'm taking my time and just basically looking at the lights and darks on my reference image and going back and forth. And notice at this point in time, when I've got most of the figure done, I'm actually bouncing back and forth between different parts of the figure. I'll be working on one section and notice that the next section needs a little bit more definition, and I'm jumping back and forth. And as you can see, it's just about getting the line work in, getting the lighting and shading done, and ultimately kind of putting things together. Take your time and just have fun at it. All right, thank you for watching this. I appreciate it. And the items in the video that you can use to complete something like this are located below. And I hope you like and subscribe. Have a good day.